Once upon a time lived a handsome prince named Jim Bob, who lived in a castle. All the ladies swooned over him and his good looks, his charming appearance that embodies strength, grace, and nobility. Just kidding. This story is about Gary the Gassy grasshopper and his best friend, Jim Bob the frog. One sunny morning in the lush meadow, Gary and Jim Bob the frog decided to go on an exciting adventure. After a week of fun and very gassy mishaps involving milkshakes, sodas, and broccoli, they were looking for something new. "We need something different today," Gary said. "No more milkshakes, no more sodas, and absolutely no broccoli." Jim Bob nodded, his own belly grumbling a little as he thought about their past gassy adventures. "Agreed, but I still want to do something fun. How about a motorcycle ride?" "A motorcycle ride? That sounds awesome. Let's do it." They both hopped to the meadow's edge where an old shiny motorcycle sat. The bike had belonged to Gary's cousin, who had once been the fastest grasshopper on wheels. Now it was ready for a new adventure with Gary and Jim Bob. Gary hopped into the driver's seat, and Jim Bob squeezed onto the back. They put on helmets and revved up the engine, ready to zoom down the winding paths of the meadow. "Let's hit the road." The motorcycle roared to life, and off they went, zooming through the meadow, breaking wind. With the wind rushing through their hair, the trees swayed, the flowers danced, and the sound of the engine filled the air. But just as they were getting into the groove of their ride, something funny happened. Gary's belly rumbled. "Uh-oh, I think I'm gonna—" "Oh, no!" Gary laughed, looking at Jim Bob. "I really need to watch what I eat." Jim Bob giggled. "Guess we can't escape the gas, huh? But hey, at least we're not around any other animals right now." They kept riding, feeling the wind in their faces. But it wasn't long before Jim Bob's tummy let out a gurgle. "Uh-oh, here it comes," Jim Bob said, trying to hold it in. But it was no use. Gary burst out laughing. "That was a big one, Jim Bob. You really tooted your own horn there." "Hey, you did the same thing earlier. We're both breaking wind today, my friend." The two friends kept riding, laughing and burping their way through the meadow. Every time they hit a bump, the uncontrollable air would escape. The sound was so loud, it almost seemed like the motorcycle itself was backfiring. As they rode through a patch of tall grass, they came to a big hill. The view from the top was amazing. They decided to stop and take a break, sitting on the grass to catch their breath. "Well, that was quite the ride," Gary said, still giggling. "But I think my tummy's having a tantrum." "I know what you mean," Jim Bob said, rubbing his belly. "Even though we skipped the milkshakes and sodas today, I think our tummies are still full of gas." Gary looked at Jim Bob, his face turning red. "Do you think the other animals can hear us from here?" Jim Bob listened for a moment. "I don't think so. But if they could, I'm sure we'd be the talk of the meadow." Gary and Jim Bob both laughed, their stomachs still rumbling. After a few more laughs and a couple more burps, they hopped back on the motorcycle and started riding again. This time, they decided to head toward the big pond for a peaceful break. The motorbike seemed to be running okay, despite its time it had been sitting in storage. But then it backfired again. Or was that Gary? As they passed through the meadow, the wind picked up, and they couldn't help but notice how odd, gassy fumes seemed to follow them, filling the air around them. They didn't know if it was the bike or their toots. It was as if their gassy adventure was taking on a life of its own. Finally, they arrived at the pond, tired but happy. They parked the motorcycle under a tree, stretched their legs, and sat down to relax by the water. "Well, Jim Bob," Gary said with a big grin, "even though we avoided all the foods that usually make us gassy, I think we still managed to have the funniest day ever." Jim Bob chuckled. "I couldn't agree more. And you know what? I wouldn't change a thing, even with all the burping and farting. We had a blast." Gary nodded. "Next time, though, maybe we'll take it easy on anything carbonated before we go riding." The two friends sat by the pond, watching the ripples in the water and the clouds drifting by. Despite all their gas and the silly noises, they knew that as long as they had each other, every adventure would be a great one, full of laughs, love, and a few unexpected toots along the way. Now, about that prince.